Senator Madigan.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. I rise today to speak to the Renewable Energy Electricity Amendment, Excessive Noise from Wind Farms Bill 2012, introduced by myself and Senator Xenophon. Mr Acting Deputy President, the bill introduced by Senator Xenophon and myself does not actually belong to us. It belongs to and represents a growing number of people in Australia who are affected by wind turbines placed near their homes in rural Australia. The amount of people living with wind farms near their home is increasing and will continue to increase, and permits are currently being granted all over the country. My stance on renewable energy has been questioned, but both Senator Xenophon and myself have spoken of the virtues of various types of renewable energy, including geothermal energy, solar energy and tidal energy. And in the course of this debate on this bill, we've spoken about a lot of peripheral issues, but not actually about the bill. And even here this morning, we've had people go off on various tangents. This bill is about people. This bill is about communities. This bill is about people's health. This bill is about there being an incentive to act and to comply by the proponents of wind farms. If there is no penalty, there is no incentive to act. If there is no regulatory body that actually regulates, it's a toothless tiger. Earlier today, we heard about campaigns' tactics of fear. Well, the campaigns' tactics of fear are very broadly used by some in the Green movement, which then bring into contention in the community the motives of some in the Green movement. And yet I do know that there are many genuine people in the Green movement who do have genuine concerns and raise those concerns in the community in a very honest and open way. But the Green movement gets tarnished by the actions of some. Earlier, in Senator Di Natale's contribution, we heard about the contribution of Professor Simon Chapman. And Professor Simon Chapman, as any other person in the Australian community, is entitled to an opinion. But when you use the term professor, most people in the community, when you are speaking on a matter of health, believe that you are a medical doctor or a professor. But in Professor Simon Chapman's case, Professor Simon Chapman is a sociologist. So let's be crystal clear here. Professor Simon Chapman is entitled to an opinion, as we all are, and that's his right in our democratic country. But the fact is, Mr Acting Deputy President, let's be crystal clear as to what he actually is and does, and acknowledge the fact that he has done, in the past, some very good work on the issue of smoking and its effect on people's health. Also, we've heard today about the impacts of coal and the effects on people's health and other forms of generation and energy. But how do we know there are these impacts? We know there are serious health impacts from people from coal and other forms of energy because there has been independent, eminent research on this. And there is still research being conducted today to find out what is happening to people. And I support that wholeheartedly, whether it be the impacts of coal seam gas or whatever. You know, to question is to learn. Quite often in the public debate and the to and fro, people in the community feel that they are disempowered. And they're disempowered because they're presented with predetermined outcomes where people turn up, go for a meeting, have the old tick and flick, and the Murray-Darling Basin plan comes to mind here. And I think that, you know, the people in Colin Gully, west of Wagga Wagga in New South Wales will attest to that, and their disgust and their sense of disengagement from the political process. Mr Acting Deputy President, as I've said from the first time I raised the issue of wind farms in this Senate, all I want is there to be independent, rigorous, eminent in Australian research under Australian conditions with the methodology, facts in the public domain that proponents, opponents and people who are undecided can see how we reach a conclusion. But even when we do reach a conclusion, Mr Acting Deputy President, that we're haven't closed our minds to new research that may present itself in the future. Mr Acting Deputy President, I'm appalled at the level of debate and arguments spouted by some opponents of this bill. The concerns of men and women around Australia have been belittled, mocked or ignored. And here we find ourselves some 20 months after the initial Senate inquiry into wind farms, chaired by Senator Xenophon, and really nothing has been done. I'd also like to clarify the fact that the National Health and Medical Research Council itself does not conduct research. Now, this is something that fails to get clarified in this place. You know, I will hand it to the National Health and Medical Research Council to do it. Well, they don't actually do research themselves. The legitimacy of claims of illness of people by some have been belittled. We've heard people refer to these people's claims as the nocebo effect, and that the experts questioned by the inquiry clearly stated could never be considered as a diagnosis until every other possibility was eliminated. Mr Acting Deputy President, I've always said that the onus of proof should not be on the residents to prove that a wind farm is damaging to his or her health. The onus of proof should be on the corporation proponent making the profits to prove that they are compliant and that they are not having an adverse effect on people's health and the community. I've also raised grave concerns about the way this bill was dealt with in committee. Leading experts on both sides of this argument from around the world gave evidence which in some cases was either ignored or distorted. I question Senator Cameron's attempts to explain away all these complaints by basing them on what he refers to also as the nocebo effect, totally ignoring the overwhelming evidence that health effects from wind turbines are not only a legitimate concern, but can and have been proved. To date, the objections I and others have received from the wind industry is about the bill's requirement for them to supply the data that will determine whether they are in breach of regulations or not. If they are not in breach, what is the problem? I would have thought they'd be tripping over themselves to provide the necessary information to support their claims that they are compliant with the so-called regulations that govern them. I find it ironic, Mr Acting Deputy President, that we have an industry in this country, the so-called proponents who would believe in the free market, the level playing field, that we have an industry that is not subject to the same requirements that any other industry in this country is subject to. Every other industry in this country is subject to background noise plus 5 decibels. This industry is not. When we talk about noise in an urban setting, say for instance if we took Redfern in Sydney, the background noise in Redfern is different to the background noise in Waubra. People living in the country are used to a different level of background noise to those people in Redfern, or Brunswick in Melbourne, or in the heart of Brisbane. You can't compare the two. I think that the problem is that, like the Waubra wind farm, many wind farms are operating without having been given a certificate of compliance by the state authority, and yet have been accredited by the Clean Energy Regulator and are in receipt of hundreds of millions of dollars in renewable energy certificates. The checks and balances appear to have been pushed aside in the rush to get these turbines up and running and to start the lucrative flow of RECs. But my argument here, this bill is to address people, and we are elected by people to represent people. We're not elected to represent corporations, and we're not elected to represent an ideology. We are elected to represent people. We, collectively in this place, have a duty of care to people. And today we've heard economic arguments. Well, the fact is we're talking about people, and time again this debate has fallen into an economic argument. This debate, this bill is about people and their health and well-being and their right to live on their properties and enjoy them the way they have for generations. These people are not political activists, and I might like to add the majority of these people, a great majority of these people, are coalition voters. But there are also people who are ALP voters and Greens voters affected by these things. And I implore all of you to think seriously about this and to give this industry the scrutiny that you foist onto other industries, and rightly so, to make them accountable. And if this industry can prove that they are compliant, that they aren't doing what people claim that's affecting their health, and that of their families and their communities, well, I'll be the first one to stand up in Parliament and admit I got it wrong. But to date, I don't believe I have got it wrong. But let me assure you, I'll stand up here and I'll say I got it wrong. But how many people ever stand up in this place and say we got it wrong? Or no, we just carry on regardless. We never say we got it wrong. But there's a whole group of people who are affected, their health is affected. Let's get to the bottom of it. Let's stop ignoring it, and let's create a real level playing field. Thank you, Mr. Acting Deputy President.
Thank you.